like to call on the representative from the government of the Russian Federation, Chumarev Sergei Leonidovich.
Thank you, Chair. Russia recognizes the importance of the participation of indigenous peoples in the work of the UN. We, as the Russian Federation, represent all citizens, regardless of their ethnic background, including indigenous peoples. We understand, however, how difficult it is to include and to broaden their participation in the existing circumstances, taking into account all of the rules of procedure in the different bodies of the UN. In MRIP itself, we do not have rules of procedure, which makes the work of this body much more difficult. Take into account the work of different platforms to broaden the inclusion of indigenous peoples, there is progress, and as we see it, above all, we are talking about the Human Rights Council and its treaty bodies. But there are other questions which have not been resolved. There is no general understanding of the absence or the presence of rules to protect the rights of indigenous peoples. Even the indigenous peoples themselves do not necessarily have a definition, or the organs that represent indigenous peoples, they do not have congresses and so forth. So we need to work on processes, and this is very difficult work. Institutes from the government are also an issue which is not regulated, and a number of governments simply do not recognize the concept of indigenous peoples and their existence on their territory. And who will take on the role of dealing with these organizations? There is no representative of indigenous peoples in these groups, and politicization and conflict between states or within a state make this more difficult. So what would be the solution? We think that above all we need to raise the level of effectiveness of participation of indigenous peoples in those platforms that are already available, such as the Permanent Forum and MRIP, and not slide into politicization of the agenda items. For example, discussing the situation in Ukraine over the course of our session. And to conclude, I would like to highlight the fact that in seeking solutions and broadening the inclusion of indigenous peoples, we need to ensure that we do not damage or politicize this issue and not put pressure on the representatives of the government and accuse them of things that they have not done, and to try to find rational compromises. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much for that statement.